She started every morning at the small airport cafe, wiping down counters, brewing cups, and carrying trays with quiet grace. No one knew how her hands used to grip a yoke at 30,000 feet, or how those same eyes once scanned weather radars and instrument panels with absolute precision. Years ago, she was one of the youngest commercial pilots in the country, until the stormy landing that haunted her ever since. The airline called it unavoidable turbulence, but she called it her failure. No one died, but the fear sank deep. So she traded the cockpit for an apron, and hid herself where no one would expect much of her. Every day she watched planes take off through the cafe window, smiling politely at passengers rushing past. Among them was a man named Ethan, a frequent traveler who always noticed that her smile never quite reached her eyes. He liked talking to her, she had a calmness about her, a warmth that didn't feel forced. But whenever he asked about her past, she gently changed the subject, pouring another cup, as if burying something she didn't dare open again. He never pushed. He just admired her kindness, unaware of the storm she once survived. One afternoon, Ethan boarded a flight for a business trip. She happened to be on the same plane as a last-minute standby passenger. She walked on board quietly, taking a middle seat, unnoticed as always. The flight attendants were cheerful, the captain confident, the routine smooth. As the engines roared and the plane lifted off, she closed her eyes, as if listening to an old voice inside her that she had ignored for too long. She didn't know this would be the flight that would change everything. 40 minutes into the air, turbulence hit, light at first, then violent enough to rattle overhead bins. The seatbelt signs flickered. Passengers murmured nervously. Then something happened that froze the entire cabin, a thud from the cockpit, followed by a flight attendant sprinting forward. Seconds later, her terrified voice echoed through the speakers. The captain had collapsed. The first officer was desperately calling for any available pilot on board. But no one stood. People screamed, others prayed. Ethan looked around helplessly, then glanced at the woman he'd seen every day at the cafe. She was breathing steadily, too steadily for someone in panic. She rose without a word. When she approached the cockpit door, passengers stared in disbelief. Someone whispered, "What is she doing?" "She serves coffee." But when she spoke, her voice was firm, so different from the shy tone they knew. "I'm a certified commercial pilot," she said. "Let me in." The first officer hesitated for half a second, then opened the door. What he saw in her eyes wasn't fear. It was muscle memory. The kind that never dies. She took the left seat, the captain's seat she once swore she'd never touch again, and her hands instinctively moved across the controls like they never stopped. The storm outside worsened. The instruments blinked warnings. The plane was drifting off course. Her breathing slowed, becoming the calm center in chaos. She coordinated with air traffic control, adjusted headings, fought the turbulence with precise counter-movements, and brought stability back to the aircraft as if she'd been flying every day of her life. The first officer looked at her in awe. Ethan, watching from the cabin, felt his heart tremble with pride and disbelief. In that moment, everyone realized they weren't being saved by a miracle. They were being saved by the woman they never truly saw. As they approached the runway for an emergency landing, she confronted the fear she'd buried for years. The last time she tried this, she had walked away thinking she didn't deserve to fly again. But now, with 200 lives depending on her, she found a strength she didn't know remained inside her. She guided the aircraft through the final descent, bracing herself for impact. The wheels hit the runway harder than usual, but steady. The plane rolled, slowed, then stopped. Silence filled the air. Then the cabin erupted into sobs and applause. When she stepped out of the cockpit, passengers reached for her hands, thanking her through tears. The flight attendants hugged her. The officers saluted her. And Ethan stood there, stunned, whispering, "You saved us." She looked at him with a trembling smile. "I just remembered who I used to be," she said softly. But Ethan shook his head. "No," he replied. "You remembered who you still are." The airline offered her the chance to return, not out of pity, but out of respect. The passengers wrote letters that went viral. She tried to walk away quietly, but the world wouldn't let her disappear this time. She wasn't just a coffee server. She was the woman who rediscovered her courage at 30,000 feet, and saved 200 souls because she refused to let fear write her final chapter. And for Ethan, the moment she stepped into that cockpit changed his life forever, not because she was a hero, but because she taught him what strength looks like when no one is watching.